Hey guys, tonight we begin with something darker. A teenage girl kneeling in a prison cell at dawn, practicing how to die, over and over, getting the angle right, because in 2 hours she'll lay her head on an executioner's block for real, and she doesn't want to mess it up. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're back again, you already know how this works. Hit like if the story grabs you, subscribe if you want more, and drop a comment. Seriously, tell me where you are right now. Are you in bed, on a night shift, folding laundry at 2 a.m? I love knowing who's listening to these stories and when. All right, get comfortable. Turn the lights down, maybe grab some water, and let's get into this. February 13th, 1542, the Tower of London. Catherine Howard is 17 years old, maybe 19, no one's entirely sure. She's been Queen of England for 18 months, and in less than 2 hours, she'll be dead. But here's what they don't tell you. Here's the part that makes historians go quiet. When they dug up the chapel in 1876, looking for England's executed queens, they found Anne Boleyn, found the dukes, found Lady Jane Grey, found nearly everyone who'd died on that scaffold. Catherine Howard? Nothing. Not a bone, not a tooth, not a trace, like she'd never existed at all. So what happened to her body? Where did her head go? And why was she the only one who simply vanished into the earth? Tonight we're pulling apart the execution no one talks about, the burial that erased a queen, and the question that still haunts the tower after 500 years. Settle in. This is going to take a while. Sunday evening, February 12th, 1542. Catherine Howard is told she will die at dawn. She's been held at the tower for 3 days. Just 3 days. From the moment those heavy gates closed behind her boat. She knew. Everyone knew. When queens entered the tower, they rarely left alive. The journey to the tower had been its own nightmare. She'd been held at Sion Abbey since November. Months of waiting, of not knowing, of being interrogated, of watching her family abandon her one by one. Her uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, the man who'd pushed her into Henry's path, who'd benefited enormously from her queenship, wrote grovelling letters to the king, blamed his niece, called her wicked, begged for mercy, for himself, not for her. Her grandmother, the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk, was imprisoned. Her siblings scattered, her Howard relatives, the ones who'd been so eager to claim connection when she was queen, now pretended they barely knew her. Because that's what you did in Tudor England when someone fell from grace. You cut them loose, fast, before the taint spread to you. On February 10th, they came for her, lords of the council, armed guards, a barge waiting at the water. Catherine panicked, screamed. Witnesses said she fought them, clawed at the doorframe, had to be physically dragged to the boat, because she knew where that boat was going, and she knew what it meant. The journey by river should have taken less than an hour, but it felt eternal. The Thames was dark, cold. February in London is bitter. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and won't leave. Catherine sat in that covered barge, surrounded by guards, watching the city slip past. London Bridge loomed ahead, and on London Bridge, mounted on spikes, were two heads, Thomas Culpeper, Francis Dereham, her alleged lovers, the men whose confessions had destroyed her. They'd been executed on December 10th. 2 months ago. Their heads had been rotting on that bridge ever since. A warning, a spectacle, a reminder of what happened to people who betrayed the king. Catherine's boat passed directly beneath them. She would have seen them, or what was left of them. Faces blackened by weather, eyes pecked out by crows, flesh hanging in strips, hair matted with dried blood and bird droppings. The smell would have been overwhelming. Sweet, rotten, the unmistakable stench of decomposition, and Catherine would have known, absolutely known, that in a few days people might be looking at her head the same way. The boat pulled up to Traitor's Gate, that water entrance to the tower, the gate that had swallowed so many prisoners and released so few. As Catherine stepped out onto those slick stone steps, she was entering the place where her cousin Anne Boleyn had walked 6 years earlier. where Anne had been held, where Anne had died, the parallel would not have been lost on her. Same family, same crime, adultery, treason, same destination, same ending. They took her to a chamber in the tower, not the royal apartments where she'd stayed as queen during happier times. A room, guarded, watched, with a window that looked out onto Tower Green, onto the scaffold site. She could see it from her window, the place where she would die. They wanted her to see it, to think about it, to understand that there was no escape, no reprieve, no miracle coming. For 3 days, Catherine lived with that view, waking up and seeing the green, going to sleep thinking about the block, eating meals if she could eat, while watching guards prepare the site, checking the axe, building up the scaffold platform, laying straw to soak up the blood, her blood. All the practical preparations for an execution, happening right outside her window, like stage hands setting up for a show. And through it all she prayed. What else could she do? A priest attended her, heard her confession, tried to prepare her soul for what was coming. Because in Tudor England, how you died mattered almost as much as why you died. A good death, accepting your fate, confessing your sins, asking forgiveness, proclaiming your faith. That could save your soul, even if it couldn't save your body. A bad death, screaming, denying, cursing, that marked you as damned. Forever. Catherine may have been losing her life, but she was fighting for her afterlife. On Sunday evening, February 12th, as the light faded and the tower settled into night, someone came to her cell, probably the lieutenant of the tower, or one of the council lords, and they told her, tomorrow, at dawn, 7 in the morning, you will die. Catherine had known this was coming. Of course she had. The bill of attainder had passed. Henry had given his consent, through commission, because he couldn't bring himself to sign it directly, but the result was the same. She was condemned. There was no appeal, no last-minute pardon, no intervention. This was happening. But knowing it and hearing it are different things. One is abstract, the other is a clock starting to tick down. 12 hours, then 11, then 10. Here's where the story gets strange. Haunting. Almost impossible to believe, except that it's documented by multiple sources. Catherine made a request. She asked them to bring her the executioner's block, the actual block, the piece of wood she'd lay her neck across tomorrow morning. She wanted to practice. Imagine that request. Imagine being the guard who heard it, the lieutenant who had to approve it. Because it's not normal. Condemned prisoners didn't typically rehearse their executions. They prayed. They wrote letters. They made peace with God. They didn't ask for props from their upcoming death scene. But Catherine did, and they brought it to her. This wasn't a small thing. The block was heavy. Solid wood, probably oak, about 2 feet long, a foot wide, 6 inches high, with a curved indentation cut into one side where your neck would rest, and it was stained. Dark, because this wasn't a new block. It had been used before, many times, for other traitors, other condemned prisoners. Their blood had soaked into the grain, had dried, had been scraped off, but never completely. You can't get blood out of wood, not really. The stain becomes part of it. They carried this block into Catherine's cell, set it down on the stone floor, and left her with it, with guards outside her door, with a priest nearby, with her ladies in waiting, the few who'd been allowed to stay with her, watching in horror. And Catherine Howard, this teenage girl who'd been Queen of England 6 months ago, got down on her knees and practiced dying. She would have knelt on the cold stone, felt the February chill seeping through her dress, positioned herself, leaned forward, laid her neck across the wood, felt the rough grain against her skin, the curve that was designed to hold a human neck steady, to make the executioner's job easier. to ensure one clean blow instead of a hacking, agonizing mess. And she would have stayed there, in that position, feeling it, understanding it, preparing her body for what tomorrow would bring. But it wasn't just about the physical position. It was about everything else. How would she walk to the scaffold? Slowly, with dignity, or would her legs give out? Would she need support? How would she climb the steps? There would be steps, probably 4 or 5. Leading up to the platform, could she manage them in her dress without tripping, without falling, without giving the watching crowd a reason to mock her or pity her? And once she was up there, once she was standing on that platform, with hundreds of eyes watching, how would she speak? The condemned were expected to give a speech, a final statement, acknowledging their crimes, asking forgiveness, proclaiming their faith, warning others not to follow their path. It was theatre, morbid, terrible theatre. But it had rules, and if you wanted to die well, if you wanted to be remembered as brave, as faithful, as redeemed, you followed the rules. Catherine would have practiced her speech, in her cell, out loud, testing the words, making sure her voice wouldn't crack, because she'd be terrified. Everyone was terrified. Even the bravest prisoners wept on the scaffold. Even grown men, warriors who'd fought in battles, shook when they knelt for the axe. Fear is biological. You can't logic your way out of it, but you can prepare for it. You can train your body to go through the motions, even when your mind is screaming. So Catherine knelt, again and again, throughout the night, placing her neck on that block, adjusting her position, making sure her hair wouldn't be in the way. That was important. You needed a clear shot at the neck. Making sure her dress would fall properly, so she'd maintain modesty even in death. Making sure she knew exactly how far forward to lean, how to keep her shoulders relaxed, how to keep her neck extended. All the tiny mechanical details of dying by beheading. Her ladies must have wept watching this. They couldn't stop her, couldn't comfort her. What do you say to someone practicing their own execution? You're doing great. Just tilt your head a bit more to the left. It's obscene. Horrific. And yet Catherine kept doing it. For hours. Witnesses said she spent most of the night at it. Kneeling. Rising. Kneeling again. Like some terrible, repetitive prayer. A rosary of death. Why would she do this? Historians have theories. Some think pure terror. That she was so afraid of dying badly, of moving at the wrong moment, of needing multiple blows, of screaming or begging or losing control, that she had to practice, had to feel in control of something. Even if that something was just how she would position herself for decapitation. Others think it was about dignity. Catherine Howard had been stripped of everything. Her title, her reputation, her freedom, her future. Her family had abandoned her. Her husband wanted her dead. The entire court had turned against her. But she could control this. She could decide how she would die. And she could make sure she'd die well. But there's another reason, one that's darker, more pragmatic. Catherine Howard grew up in a world where executions were public entertainment, where people brought their children to watch traitors hang, where the quality of your death was discussed for years afterward. She would have heard the stories everyone had, the cautionary tales of executions gone wrong. The Countess of Salisbury, Margaret Pole, executed in 1541, just a year before Catherine. 67 years old, the last of the Plantagenets, dragged to the block on charges of treason. She refused to put her head down, told the executioner she was no traitor. He was supposed to execute her anyway. But she wouldn't cooperate, so he chased her around the scaffold, hacking at her with the axe. The first blow hit her shoulder, the second her neck, but didn't sever. The third, the fourth. Witnesses counted 11 blows. 11. Before she finally died, it took nearly a minute, while she ran, while she screamed, while the crowd watched in horror. That story would have circulated at court, whispered in corridors, gasped about in bedchambers. It was the nightmare scenario, the thing every condemned prisoner feared. Not a clean death, a butchering. And Catherine would have known about it, would have heard the details, would have lain awake at night, back when she thought she was safe, when she was still queen, imagining what those final moments must have been like, never thinking she'd face the same. There were other stories. Sir Thomas More, executed in 1535. Saintly, scholarly Thomas More. His death was supposedly dignified, but even he had to adjust his beard before laying his neck down, joking to the executioner that his beard had committed no treason and shouldn't be cut. Even he needed that moment of control, that tiny gesture of humanity before the blade fell. Anne Boleyn got a French swordsman, imported specially for her execution. Using a sword instead of an axe, it was supposed to be more humane, faster, cleaner, and it was. By all accounts, Anne died instantly. One swift stroke. Her head severed so quickly she might not have even felt it. That was considered a mercy, a mark of respect. Even though she was dying for adultery and treason, even though Henry had destroyed her, he gave her that much. A good death. Catherine was getting an axe, a common executioner. No special treatment, no imported swordsman, no ceremony, because Henry had learned something from Anne Boleyn's execution. That execution had been too grand, too formal, too much like executing actual royalty. It had made people uncomfortable, made them question whether Anne really deserved to die, made her into something approaching a martyr. Henry didn't want that for Catherine. He wanted her erased, forgotten, dispatched efficiently and without ceremony, like putting down an animal that had bitten its owner. So Catherine got the axe, and the axe was unpredictable. Even with a skilled executioner, and most Tower executioners were skilled, it could go wrong. If the prisoner moved, if the executioner's aim was off, if the blade wasn't sharp enough, if the neck muscles tensed at the wrong moment, if anything went even slightly wrong, you got a horror show instead of a quick death. Catherine knew this. Lying in her cell that night, with the block in front of her, she knew, and so she practiced, got the position perfect, memorized how it felt, so that tomorrow morning, when her body was flooded with terror and adrenaline, and her mind was screaming at her to run, she could go through the motions, automatically, correctly. She could put her neck in the exact right position and keep it there, no matter what. There's something both heartbreaking and chilling about that image. This 17-year-old girl, or 19, we don't even know exactly how old she was, kneeling on cold stone in a prison cell at midnight, practicing how to lay her head down so a man with an axe could cut it off as efficiently as possible, trying to ensure she'd die well, die quickly, die with dignity, because that was the only thing she had left, the only victory available, a clean death, one blow, no screaming, no running, no becoming another horror story whispered in Tudor halls, just a quick end. And then nothing. The night must have passed in agony. Even if she wasn't practicing the whole time, she couldn't sleep. How could you sleep knowing dawn meant death? Some prisoners managed it. Exhaustion claimed them. Their bodies shut down, but most stayed awake, counting the hours, listening to the sounds of the tower, the guards changing shift, the bell marking midnight, 1 in the morning, 2, 3, each hour bringing sunrise closer, each hour bringing the end. Catherine probably prayed. The priest would have been there, leading her through prayers, hearing her confession one final time, assuring her that if she died with a contrite heart, if she acknowledged her sins and asked God's forgiveness, her soul would be saved. That heaven awaited, that this mortal death was just a doorway to eternal life. That's what they told condemned prisoners. What else could they say? You're about to have your head cut off and there's nothing anyone can do about it. Better to focus on the afterlife, on salvation, on meaning. Did Catherine believe it? Did she find comfort in those prayers? Or was she just going through the motions because that's what you did? We can't know. We only know that she knelt, that she prayed, that she practiced, and that when the first grey light of dawn began seeping through her window on February 13th, 1542, Catherine Howard rose, washed her face, let her ladies dress her in black velvet, and prepared to walk to her death. February 13th, dawn. The Tower of London wakes early on execution days. There's work to do. Final preparations. The scaffold needs to be checked. The straw spread thick. It'll need to soak up blood. The axe sharpened one last time. The executioner readied. He needs to dress appropriately, traditionally in black, sometimes masked, sometimes not. He needs his payment ready. The condemned prisoner will give it to him as part of the ritual, and he needs to be sober, focused, ready to do his job cleanly. The witnesses arrive at 7 in the morning. Members of the King's Council, lords of the realm, foreign ambassadors. This is official. This needs to be witnessed, documented, so that later, when people ask, did Catherine Howard really die? There will be multiple credible sources to confirm. Yes, we saw it. We were there. It happened. The Duke of Suffolk is there. Various other lords. The French ambassador. The imperial ambassador. All dressed formally. All sombre. This is grim business. Even if you think the prisoner deserves to die, watching an execution is not pleasant, especially when the prisoner is a young woman, someone who was, until very recently, their queen. Notably absent, the Duke of Norfolk, Catherine's uncle, the head of her family, the man who engineered her rise, who put her in front of Henry, who benefited enormously when she became queen. He's not there. He distanced himself the moment the accusations broke, wrote letters to Henry, grovelling, desperate letters, calling Catherine wicked, calling her a disgrace to the Howard name, begging the king not to blame the whole family for one girl's sins. And it worked. Norfolk kept his head, kept his lands, kept his position, but he lost his niece, and he didn't come to watch her die, couldn't face it, or didn't care enough to bother. We don't know which, just that he wasn't there. Catherine is brought out around 9 in the morning, 2 hours later than scheduled. No one records exactly why the delay. Maybe she couldn't stop shaking, couldn't walk. Maybe her ladies needed extra time to prepare her, to get her dressed, to dry her tears, to tell her she could do this. Maybe the executioner needed more time to sharpen the blade, or maybe the council lords were late, dragging their feet, reluctant to start this terrible piece of theatre. Whatever the reason, the sun is fully up when Catherine finally emerges from her chamber. She's wearing black velvet, the same dress she'd worn on the boat 3 days earlier. Black for mourning, for death, for the end. Her face is pale. Witnesses will later describe her as terrified, shaking, barely able to stand. She needs assistance to walk. Guards on either side, supporting her, almost carrying her. Her ladies follow behind, weeping openly. No one tries to stop them. What would be the point? This is tragedy, pure, undeniable. A teenage girl walking to her execution. You'd have to have ice in your veins not to weep. The distance from her chamber to the scaffold site is not far, maybe 100 yards, but it must have felt like miles, every step taking her closer, every step impossible to take back. This is the moment when some prisoners bolt, try to run, even though there's nowhere to run to. The tower is locked, guarded, surrounded by walls 20 feet high. But panic doesn't care about logic. Some prisoners fight, scream, have to be dragged physically to the block. Others go meek, docile, almost cataleptic, their minds shutting down, removing themselves from what's happening, going somewhere else internally because this reality is too much to bear. Catherine walks, slowly, with support, but she walks, no running, no screaming. The hours of practice paying off. Her body knows what to do. Keep moving, keep breathing, make it to the scaffold, up the steps, onto the platform. Don't think, just move. And she does. The scaffold stands in the middle of Tower Green, a wooden platform maybe 5 feet high, 4 steps leading up. built sturdy enough to hold multiple people, the prisoner, the executioner, the priest, maybe a guard or two. The wood is new, built specifically for this execution, though the block itself, as we know, is old, stained, used. The platform is covered in straw, fresh straw, yellow. It smells clean, earthy. It won't smell clean for long. There's a block in the centre, waiting, and near the edge of the platform, the executioner, dressed in black, holding an axe, not showing it to Catherine. Not yet, that would be cruel, but it's there, ready. Witnesses say Catherine looked at the block, just looked at it, and you can only imagine what went through her mind. All those hours last night, practicing, preparing, and now here it is. For real, this is it. This is the last thing you'll see before you see nothing ever again. That rough wooden curve that your neck will rest in, that your head will lay across, while a stranger with an axe aims for the back of your neck and swings, and then everything stops. But first the speech, the ritual, the performance, because this is not just an execution. This is a moral lesson, a warning, a demonstration of royal justice. And the prisoner has a role to play. Catherine climbs the final steps onto the scaffold, stands before the crowd, maybe 50 people, maybe 100. Council lords, guards, tower residents, the executioner, the priest, all watching her, waiting for her to speak. Her voice is weak. Multiple witnesses note this, barely audible, shaking. She's terrified. Of course she is. She's 17 years old and about to die. But she says the words, the traditional words, acknowledging her faults. She says she's offended God and the king, says she deserves death, not just death, 100 deaths, 1,000 deaths, for her crimes, for her sins, for betraying the king who had been so gracious to her, who had given her everything, who had loved her, and who she had repaid with treachery. Is she sincere? Who knows? She's saying what she's supposed to say, what's expected, the script for a good death. Whether she believes it, whether she thinks she actually deserves to die, is irrelevant. She says it. She asks forgiveness. From God, from the king, from everyone she's wronged, and she proclaims her faith, says she trusts in Christ's mercy, that she goes to him now, that she hopes for salvation, that she prays everyone watching will learn from her terrible example. There's a legend that she said, "I die a queen, but I would rather have died the wife of Culpeper." It's romantic, dramatic, the kind of line that makes great television. Catherine choosing love over power, dying with her lover's name on her lips, defiant to the end. But it's fiction. No eyewitness records those words. Not the French ambassador, not the imperial ambassador, not any of the English lords. They all say she followed the traditional script, humble, contrite, faithful. No grand romantic declarations, no defiance. Just a frightened teenager saying the words she was supposed to say, so she could die and end this. After the speech, the ritual continues. The executioner steps forward, kneels. This is his part. He asks her forgiveness for what he's about to do. It's formal, required. Catherine grants it. Because that's what you do. You forgive the man who's about to kill you, because he's just doing his job, just following orders, nothing personal, and you pay him. Catherine gives him coins, her payment, a tip essentially, insurance. Please do this cleanly, please don't make me suffer. One blow, that's all I ask, one clean blow. The executioner takes the coins, nods, promises, he'll do his job well. He's a professional. This is what he does. Catherine kneels, all that practice, all those hours last night. It's automatic now. Her body knows. She positions herself, adjusts her dress, tucks her hair back, makes sure nothing's in the way, makes sure her neck is clear, extended, in exactly the right position. The executioner stands behind her. To her side, slightly, the angle matters. You don't stand directly behind, you come at it from an angle, diagonal. gives you better leverage, better accuracy. Catherine can probably hear him, breathing, shifting his weight, gripping the axe handle, testing the balance, getting ready. Does she close her eyes, pray silently? Think of her mother, dead years ago? Think of Thomas Culpeper, head rotting on London Bridge? Think of Henry, the king she'd married, who'd called her his rose without a thorn, who now wanted her dead? We don't know. Her last thoughts are her own. Private, lost. All we know is that she knelt, that she placed her neck on the block, that she stayed still, that she didn't scream, that she didn't run, that she did exactly what she'd practiced, exactly right. The executioner raises the axe, heavy, maybe 8 pounds, long handle, blade sharp, polished. He's done this before. Knows the angle, knows the spot. Back of the neck, between the vertebrae. If you hit it right, the head comes off clean, instant. The prisoner feels nothing, or almost nothing. A fraction of a second of pressure, maybe. Maybe not even that. The brain shuts down so fast there's no time for pain signals to register. One moment, you exist. The next, you don't. That's the theory. That's the goal. He swings, the blade falls. Metal cuts through flesh, through bone, through tissue. Through the vertebrae, Catherine's been alive. For 17, maybe 19 years. And in less than a second, that stops. Her head separates from her. Body falls into the straw. Her body slumps, blood pours, not spraying like in movies, but flowing. Thick, dark, pulsing with her dying heartbeat. Because the heart doesn't stop immediately. It keeps beating for a few seconds, pumping blood out of the severed neck, soaking the straw, turning it red. The smell is overwhelming. Copper, iron, sweet. The smell of freshly spilled blood is distinct, unmistakable. The witnesses can smell it, can see it pooling, can hear it dripping. One blow, clean. The executioner did his job well. Catherine died quickly, as well as anyone could die on a scaffold. The thing she'd feared most, multiple blows, a botched execution, agony prolonged, didn't happen. She got her good death, her dignified death, the death she'd practiced for. It's a small mercy, but in Tudor England, small mercies were all you got. And then immediately, before Catherine's body has even stopped bleeding, they bring out Jane Boleyn, Lady Rochford. Jane Boleyn, Anne Boleyn's sister-in-law, the widow of George Boleyn, who'd been executed alongside Anne back in 1536. Jane had been one of Catherine's ladies-in-waiting, one of her closest attendants, and according to the accusations, one of her enablers. Jane had arranged meetings between Catherine and Thomas Culpeper, had stood guard, had passed messages, had helped facilitate the affair, or the alleged affair, the affair that may or may not have actually happened but which everyone had confessed to under threat of torture. Jane had lost her mind in prison, completely, genuinely insane, raving, incoherent, hysterical. The pressure had broken her. She'd seen her husband executed, had testified against Anne Boleyn, her own sister-in-law, had survived that, had clawed her way back to some semblance of a life, had attached herself to Catherine Howard, the new young queen, a chance to regain status, position, security, and now she was being executed for helping that queen commit adultery. It was too much. Her mind couldn't take it. She'd snapped. Tudor law said you couldn't execute an insane person. It was considered unjust, cruel. You had to be of sound mind to be executed, to understand what was happening, to confess properly, to die a good death. But Henry wanted Jane dead. Needed her dead. She was a witness, a loose end, someone who knew too much, someone whose testimony had helped convict Catherine. She couldn't be left alive. So Henry did something unprecedented. He had Parliament pass a law, a special law, just for this, making it legal to execute insane people, specifically so he could kill Jane Boleyn. The law passed. Jane was condemned, and on the morning of February 13th, 1542, she was brought to the scaffold. After Catherine, The straw is still wet with Catherine's blood. Literally. Still red. Still soaking in. Jane walks through it, or is dragged through it. Sources differ on how coherent she was that morning. Some say she'd regained some composure, had moments of lucidity, enough to speak, enough to die properly. Others suggest she was still mad, raving, that they had to force her up the steps, that she didn't understand what was happening until the last moment. Either way, she climbs the scaffold, stands where Catherine stood minutes ago, kneels where Catherine knelt. Her knees press into straw, soaked with her queen's blood. She can feel it. Cold, wet, sticky. She's kneeling in Catherine Howard's blood, and in a moment, her blood will mix with it. Two women, both executed for the same crime, both dead on the same scaffold within minutes of each other, their blood literally mixing in the straw. Jane speaks, or tries to. Her words are recorded as rambling, incoherent, but she hits the main points. She confesses. She deserves death. She sinned against God and the king. She asks forgiveness. And then she kneels, places her neck on the block. The same block Catherine used, still warm from Catherine's neck, still wet with Catherine's blood. Jane Boleyn lays her head down, and the executioner swings again. One blow. Her head falls, her body slumps, more blood in the straw, mixing. Red on red. Two women, two heads, two bodies, both dead within maybe 15 minutes. Both guilty of helping a teenage queen have an affair. Or maybe not have an affair. Maybe just of being in the wrong place, at the wrong time. Of being convenient scapegoats. Of being women who knew too much. Either way, they're dead. And the spectators file away, silent, grim. Even hardened Tudor politicians found this disturbing. Two women executed in quick succession. Neither of them elderly, neither of them hardened criminals. Just women who'd made mistakes or hadn't, but who died anyway. The bodies and heads are collected, quickly. This isn't ceremonial. There's no state funeral, no lying in state, no formal procession, just workers, tower staff, probably the same men who built the scaffold. They gather the bodies, the heads, put them in simple shrouds, or maybe not even shrouds, maybe just bare, and they carry them across Tower Green, through the gates, to the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, the Tower's parish church, the traditional burial place for executed prisoners, where Anne Boleyn rested, where traitors went when no one else would take them. The chapel is small, old, the floor is packed earth covered with stones. Beneath those stones, bodies, lots of bodies. The chapel had been there for centuries, used for tower executions since medieval times. The floor was essentially a mass grave, not organised, not mapped, just bodies, buried wherever there was space, sometimes in coffins, usually not, just wrapped in cloth and lowered into holes dug in the chapel floor, covered with dirt, a stone laid on top, and that was it. No marker, no name, no memorial, just another body in the ground. Catherine and Jane are carried into the chapel, together. Their executions were back to back. Their burials are too. Someone has already dug the holes. 2. Holes in the chancel, near where Anne Boleyn supposedly rests. The geography of the chapel means Catherine will be buried close to her cousin. Both queens, both Howards, both executed for adultery, both dead before 30. It's grimly appropriate, tragically parallel. They lower Catherine's body into the hole, her head placed with it. This is important. You don't bury the head separately. That would be desecration. Even traitors get buried whole. So Catherine's head is positioned with her body. An attempt at dignity in death. An attempt to make her whole again, even though she's not, even though she never will be. But they try, and then, here's where the story takes its strange turn. They add something. Quicklime, calcium oxide, a caustic chemical, white powder. It's poured into Catherine's grave, covering her body, coating her skin, settling into the folds of her dress, getting into her hair, her mouth, her severed neck, everywhere. a thick layer of it, more than you'd normally use, almost like they're trying to make sure, trying to ensure something. Quicklime serves a purpose in burials. It speeds decomposition, useful in crowded graveyards, in plague times, when you need bodies to break down fast, when you don't have space, when disease is a concern. It's practical, medical, but it's not standard for executed prisoners. Most people buried in the chapel don't get quicklime. They just get dirt, stones, the normal process of decay, slow, natural, eventual. But Catherine gets quicklime, deliberately, specifically. Someone made that decision, someone ordered it, brought it to the chapel, had it ready, poured it into her grave before covering her with dirt. And the question is, why? Why treat Catherine's burial differently? Why add this chemical? What were they trying to achieve? Theory 1. Age. Catherine is young. 17, 18, 19, we still don't know exactly. Young bodies decompose differently than old ones. The bones are softer, less mineralized, more porous, less dense. The quicklime would help speed things up, make the body break down faster, disappear quicker. It's practical, efficient, nothing personal, just cemetery management. Theory 2, disease. Maybe they were worried about disease, about miasma, the bad air that medieval people thought caused plague. A fresh body in a crowded chapel might pose a risk. Quicklime would neutralize that. Kill bacteria, prevent spread. It's a public health measure, protecting the tower residents, the guards, the prisoners, anyone who might enter the chapel. The fact that it's Catherine specifically doesn't matter. They'd do it for anyone. Or so the theory goes. Theory 3. Hatred. Henry ordered it, specifically, personally, because he didn't just want Catherine dead. He wanted her gone, erased, obliterated. The rage of a humiliated king who'd been made to look like a fool, who'd loved this girl, or thought he had, who'd called her his rose without a thorn, who'd showered her with gifts, and attention, and affection, and who'd been betrayed, or thought he had. Whether the affair actually happened is almost irrelevant. Henry believed it happened, and that belief was enough to fuel a desire for revenge that extended beyond death. Quicklime doesn't just speed decomposition, it's violent, it burns. When it contacts moisture, and bodies are full of moisture, it reacts chemically. Generates heat, up to 130 degrees Celsius, hot enough to cook flesh, to destroy soft tissue rapidly, to break down organic matter into sludge. It's not gentle, it's not peaceful, it's aggressive decomposition, chemical warfare on a corpse. And if Henry ordered it, if he specifically wanted Catherine's body treated this way, it suggests a level of fury that's almost incomprehensible. She'd wounded his pride, his ego, his sense of himself as king and husband and man, and he wanted to make sure that even in death, even buried in the earth, she'd be destroyed, broken down, turned to nothing. Theory 4. Shame. The Howard family ordered it, or requested it, or suggested it, because Catherine's body was evidence, physical evidence, that could be examined, exhumed, autopsied if anyone ever wanted to. And what might that reveal? Signs of pregnancy? Signs that she'd been intimate with someone other than Henry? Signs that the accusations were true? Or signs that they were false? Either way, better to destroy the evidence. Make it impossible to verify anything. Erase the scandal along with the girl. Protect the family name. Distance themselves completely. If there's no body to examine, there's no proof of anything. Just stories, accusations, confessions extracted under duress, but no physical evidence. The perfect cover-up. We don't know which theory's correct. Maybe all of them, maybe none. The records don't explain. They just note that Catherine Howard was buried in the chapel, that quicklime was used, that Jane Boleyn was buried the same day. But Jane's grave? No mention of quicklime for her. Just normal burial, just dirt and stones and decay, which means the decision to use quicklime was specific to Catherine. Deliberate, targeted, Someone wanted Catherine's body to disappear faster, more thoroughly, more completely, and that someone had the power to make it happen. The graves are covered, stones laid on top, heavy stones, flat, unmarked, no names carved, no dates, no indication that beneath this stone lies a queen, a girl who wore a crown, who lived in palaces, who dined with ambassadors, who danced with the king. Nothing, just stone, and beneath the stone, earth, and beneath the earth, a body, slowly, or not so slowly, breaking down. The quicklime doing its work, heating up, reacting with moisture, dissolving tissue, breaking bonds, turning flesh into soup, turning bone into powder, turning Catherine Howard into chemical residue mixed with London clay. And for 334 years, that's where she stays, hidden beneath the chapel floor, the chapel, forgotten, erased, occasionally mentioned in history books. Oh yes, Catherine Howard, Henry VIII's fifth wife, executed for adultery, but not real, not physical, not present. Just a name, a story, a cautionary tale about young girls who marry old kings and learn too late that power and danger sleep in the same bed. Until 1876, when Queen Victoria decides the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula needs restoration, and someone realises that means digging up the floor. And when you dig up the floor, you find the bodies, all the bodies, hundreds of them, from centuries of executions, and among those bodies should be England's executed queens, including Catherine Howard. So they start digging, carefully, methodically, with scientists and doctors and historians watching, recording, trying to identify who's who, and they find everyone, except Catherine. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about what happened in those 334 years. What the quicklime did, how it worked, why it mattered. Because the chemistry here is important. The details matter. Understanding how Catherine Howard disappeared requires understanding the violence of chemical decomposition. Quicklime is calcium oxide, CaO, simple compound. When it comes into contact with water, it reacts violently. The chemical equation is CaO plus H2O, CaOH2 plus heat. Lots of heat. This is an exothermic reaction. Energy is released in the form of heat, specifically enough heat to raise the temperature to 130 degrees Celsius. That's 266 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot enough to burn skin, to cook flesh, to break down organic tissue rapidly. In a normal burial, a body decomposes through bacterial action. Microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, insects, consume the organic matter, break it down. It's slow, takes years, decades even, in the right conditions. Cold soil, dry soil, deep burial, bodies can last a very long time. The Victorian excavators found skeletons in the chapel dating back to the 1300s. 300, 400, 500 years old. Still intact, still identifiable. Bones survive. That's why we can do archaeology, why we can learn from ancient burials. Because bones are durable. They resist decay. Under the right conditions, they last basically forever. But add quicklime, and everything changes. The alkaline conditions it creates are hostile to normal decomposition. Bacteria can't function well in high pH environments. So bacterial decomposition slows, but chemical decomposition accelerates. The heat breaks down proteins, denatures them, destroys the structure. Soft tissue, muscle, organs, skin, breaks down rapidly, within weeks instead of years. It essentially melts, liquefies, seeps into the soil, becomes indistinguishable from mud. But bones are different. Bones are calcium phosphate. Ca3PO4, crystalline structure. Very stable. Under normal conditions, bones resist decomposition. They're the last thing to go. But in highly alkaline conditions, the conditions created by quicklime, even bones break down. The calcium phosphate dissolves, slowly, over years, decades, but it dissolves, leaches into the surrounding soil, becomes calcium ions floating in groundwater, absorbed by surrounding earth, dispersed, gone. How long does this take depends on many factors: how much quicklime was used, how deep the burial was, the pH of the surrounding soil, the moisture content, the temperature, the presence of other chemicals. It's complex, but 300 years, more than enough time for quicklime to completely dissolve a young skeleton, especially a young skeleton, because Catherine was young. Teenage bones aren't fully mineralized. They're still growing, still developing, more porous, more vulnerable to chemical attack, less dense, less resistant. Adult bones are like stone, hard, dense, mineralized. They can survive extreme conditions, but teenage bones are more like chalk, harder than cartilage, softer than mature bone, still incorporating calcium, still strengthening, still becoming what they'll eventually be. But not there yet. Not fully hardened, and in alkaline conditions in the presence of quicklime over centuries, they don't stand a chance. They dissolve, leach, disappear, become powder that mixes with soil until you can't separate them. Can't tell where bone ends and dirt begins. So that's what happened to Catherine Howard. Probably, most likely. The quicklime was added to her grave. It reacted with moisture from her body, generated heat, burned away soft tissue in weeks, and then slowly, over decades and centuries, dissolved her bones, turned her skeleton into calcium ions, into chemical residue, into powder, into nothing. Until by 1876, when they came looking for her, there was nothing left to find. No bones, no teeth, no fragments, not even bone dust that could be tested. Just soil, just clay, just the earth that had held her body once but retained no memory of it. But let's jump forward now, to 1876, to Victorian England, to Queen Victoria on the throne, to a very different world, a world with trains and telegraphs, and photography and science, a world that's starting to understand archaeology, to value history, to want to preserve the past, and a world that's starting to look at Tudor executions not as justice, but as tragedy, as excess, as examples of royal tyranny that should be remembered and learned from. The chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula is in bad shape. It's old, medieval. The floor has sunk in places, stones are cracked, the whole structure is unstable, and it's unsanitary, because beneath that floor are hundreds of bodies, from centuries of executions. And they weren't buried properly, weren't embalmed, weren't sealed, just wrapped in cloth sometimes and shoved into holes, and over time those bodies decomposed, and the decomposition products seeped into the soil, into the groundwater, into the chapel itself. It smells, it's damp, it's unhealthy, and Queen Victoria wants it fixed. Sir Charles Yorke, Constable of the Tower, submits a restoration plan. The goals are practical: stabilise the structure, relay the floor, install heating, make it suitable for worship. Because the chapel is still functioning, still used for services. Tower residents attend, guards, prisoners. It's a living church, not just a tomb. But to do the restoration, they need to dig up the floor, which means excavating the bodies, which means potentially finding some very famous people, including Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, Lady Jane Grey, the Dukes of Northumberland and Somerset, maybe Thomas More, maybe John Fisher, maybe dozens of other historical figures whose names had been lost but whose bodies were supposedly somewhere in that chapel. This is an archaeological opportunity, a historical goldmine, but it's also deeply sensitive. These are human remains, people who died violently, who were condemned as traitors, whose families might still exist, whose descendants might object. It needs to be handled carefully, respectfully, with dignity. Queen Victoria approves the restoration, but she issues strict instructions. Every bone must be labelled, every burial documented. The remains must be treated with reverence, carefully examined, identified if possible, reburied with honour. No desecration, no carelessness. These might be traitors, but they're still human, still entitled to respect in death. And some of them, Anne Boleyn especially, Victoria sees as tragic figures. Women who died unjustly, who deserve, belatedly, some recognition of their suffering. The work begins in August 1876. They remove the pews, carefully, one by one. Then they start lifting the floor stones, the pavement, large flat stones that have been there for centuries. Some are cracked, some have sunk. Beneath them earth, packed hard, and bones, so many bones. As soon as they start digging, they find them, scattered everywhere, not in neat graves, not organised, just bones, mixed together, jumbled, from different burials, different eras, different people, all mixed up. Because here's what happened over the centuries. The chapel floor was reused, over and over. When someone new needed to be buried, they'd dig a hole. And if that hole intersected an old burial, they'd just move the bones, shove them aside, make room, bury the new person, cover everything back up. No care for keeping burials intact, no respect for leaving the dead undisturbed. Just pragmatic cemetery management. We need space. These bones are old. Move them. Dig here instead. And so, over centuries, burials got disturbed. Bones got scattered. Skeletons got mixed. Until by 1876, the chapel floor is essentially a bone soup. Hundreds of skeletons, all jumbled together, impossible to separate. The excavators work carefully. They sift through the earth, collect bones, try to sort them, group them. This skull with this pelvis, with these leg bones, trying to reconstruct individuals. It's painstaking, difficult, often impossible, and they find remains from all eras, medieval bones, Tudor bones, Stuart bones. Some are ancient, fragmentary, damaged. Others are more recent, more complete. Some still have scraps of cloth attached, bits of shroud, traces of coffin wood. Most don't, just bare bones, brown with age, fragile, handled carefully because they might crumble. Queen Victoria, reading the reports, is horrified. This is worse than expected. The dead have not been treated well, not been left in peace. Their burials are a disaster, a disgrace. She orders increased care. Every bone must be collected, boxed, labelled with where it was found, reburied in the crypt with dignity, with respect, even if we don't know who they are. Even if they're just fragments, they're human. They deserve better. The excavators keep working, moving deeper into the chapel, reaching the chancel, the area near the altar. This is where the most important burials should be, the ones the records mention. Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, the Dukes. They have maps, plans drawn up from historical research, places where documents say these people were buried. It's not exact. Medieval record keeping wasn't precise, but it's something, a starting point. Dr. Frederick Muat is brought in. He's a surgeon, a medical professor, Queen Victoria's physician, an expert in anatomy. His job is to examine the bones they find, to determine sex, age at death, cause of death if possible, to try to identify individuals based on physical characteristics. It's early forensic science, barely a science yet, but he's the best they have. In October 1876, they reach the spot where Anne Boleyn should be buried, according to the records, according to the tower's own documentation. Right there, about 2 feet from the altar, they dig carefully, slowly, brushing away dirt, and they find bones. A skeleton, female, small, delicate, lying roughly 2 feet below the surface, not in a coffin, just wrapped in something organic that had long since decayed, cloth probably, a shroud, all gone now, just bones and dirt. Dr. Muat examines them, measures them, studies them. His report is detailed, precise. He notes, female, between 25 and 30 years old at death, small frame, delicate proportions, height about 5 feet, maybe 5'3", well-formed skull, Oval face, square chin, large eye sockets, small vertebrae, especially in the neck. Very small vertebrae. The kind you'd expect in someone with a slender, graceful neck. The kind of neck that would be easy to sever with one blow. The location is right, the age is right, the build is right, everything matches. This is Anne Boleyn. Or at least, this is almost certainly Anne Boleyn. As certain as you can be without DNA testing, which doesn't exist yet, won't exist for another century. But based on everything they know, everything they can measure and observe, this is her. This is the skeleton of Henry VIII's second wife, executed in 1536, buried here, found here, intact, present, real. They're related, reverent. This is history, physical history, the bones of a queen, a woman who changed England, who broke England from Rome, who gave birth to Elizabeth I, who died on a scaffold for crimes she probably didn't commit. And here she is, in their hands, small, fragile, human. They treat her with extreme care, document everything, photograph the position she was found in, measure every bone, and then they seal her remains in a lead coffer, a small lead box with her name engraved on it. Anne Boleyn, died 1536, found 1876, and they rebury her in the same spot, but with dignity this time, with ceremony, with a memorial plaque above her grave, beautiful, formal, marble inlaid into the chapel floor, her name, her coat of arms, her dates, finally. After 340 years, Anne Boleyn gets a marked grave, gets acknowledgement, gets respect. The excavators are confident now. The records were accurate. They found Anne exactly where the documents said she'd be, which means the other burials should be findable too. Next on the list, Catherine Howard, who should be right next to Anne, buried the same day as Lady Rochford. Somewhere in the chancel, close to the altar, the records are clear. She's there, somewhere. They search. November 11th, 1876, 2 full days of excavating, removing stones, digging carefully, sifting through earth, looking for bones, for anything that might be a burial, for any indication that a body was laid here. They have maps, plans, places where the documents suggest Catherine might be. They try multiple spots, dig in concentric circles, check and recheck, nothing. They find other burials. The Duke of Northumberland, large male skeleton, around 50 years old, big skull, everything matches. They seal him up, rebury him, mark his grave. They find 2 female skeletons, close together. One is around 30 to 40 years old, delicate build, disturbed, many bones missing. They determine it's Lady Rochford, Jane Boleyn, executed the same day as Catherine. Her remains are partial, incomplete, but they're there, identifiable. The second female is older, tall, possibly another Howard, another execution, another forgotten name. They box her bones, label them, give her a burial with honour, even if they don't know exactly who she is. But Catherine Howard, nothing. Not a bone, not a tooth, not a skull fragment, not a vertebra, not a finger bone, nothing. They dig deeper, wider, expand their search area, check places she shouldn't be, just in case the records are wrong. Nothing. They sift the earth through fine screens, looking for tiny fragments, anything. Nothing. Just dirt, just London clay, dense, brownish, slightly damp, packed hard by centuries of weight, but no bones, no indication that anyone was ever buried there. No decomposition stains, no coffin nails, no scraps of cloth, nothing. The excavation committee is baffled. The records say she was buried here. Multiple documents, tower records, council records, witness accounts. They all say Catherine Howard was executed. Her body was taken to the chapel. She was buried there, in the chancel, near Anne Boleyn, next to Lady Rochford. But there's nothing. She's not there. Or if she is, she's been so completely destroyed that they can't find any trace, not even a hint, not even a suspicion of a burial. Algernon Bertram Freeman Mitford One of the committee members records his theory. He writes, "Of Catherine Howard not a trace, but she was so young that the greedy lime would make short work of eating away those tender bones." The greedy lime. That phrase. He's talking about quicklime. He knows or suspects that quicklime was used in Catherine's burial, and he's suggesting that's why she's gone. Why they can't find her? Because the lime consumed her, ate her, dissolved her bones completely, left nothing, not even fragments, just chemical residue mixed into the soil so thoroughly that you couldn't separate it, couldn't detect it, couldn't prove a body had ever been there. Is he right? Probably. It's the best explanation, the simplest explanation. Catherine was young, her bones were soft, quicklime was used. Over 3 centuries, the lime dissolved everything. End of story. But it's not provable, not testable, not verifiable, because there's nothing to test, no bones to examine, no DNA to extract, no forensic evidence to analyse, just absence, just an empty spot in the chapel floor where a queen should be but isn't. They create a memorial for her anyway. What else can they do? The records say she's there. History says she's there. She died. She was buried. Even if we can't find her, we can acknowledge her. So they commission a memorial plaque, marble, beautiful, matches Anne Boleyn's, same style, same quality, inscribed with her name. Catherine Howard, Queen of England, died February 13th, 1542, her coat of arms. The Howard arms quartered with the royal arms, the symbols of her brief queenship, the crown she wore for 18 months before it was stripped away, and they install this plaque in the chapel floor, near where she should be, near Anne, near the altar, a memorial to a body that doesn't exist, a marker for a grave that's empty, a name carved in stone for a woman who became dust. Every year, on February 13th, people leave flowers. Red roses usually, small bouquets laid on Catherine's memorial tile, remembering her, mourning her, acknowledging that she existed, that she mattered, that she deserved better than quicklime and oblivion. The flowers wilt, are cleared away, replaced by new flowers the next year. A cycle of remembrance for someone who has no body. No bones, no physical presence except a name on marble and a space in history. And that's where the story should end. Catherine Howard, gone, dissolved, erased, lost to chemical decomposition and the passage of time. But there's one more twist, one more possibility, one more theory that historians whisper about but rarely discuss publicly. Because it requires admitting that maybe we've been wrong for 500 years. What if Catherine Howard wasn't buried with quicklime? What if that detail is wrong? What if it's a later assumption? Historians working backwards from the result. She's gone, therefore something must have destroyed her. Quicklime destroys bones, therefore quicklime. But not actually documented. The Tower records don't specify quicklime. They just say she was buried. The witnesses don't mention it. They weren't there for the burial anyway. They left after the execution. The burial happened privately. Tower staff, chapel workers, people whose names we don't know, who didn't write reports, who didn't document their work. So what if the quicklime theory is wrong? What if she wasn't buried in the chapel at all? What if, in the chaos after her execution, with Henry raging, with the Howards scrambling to save themselves, with everyone trying to distance themselves from the scandal, someone made a different decision? What if a servant, a guard, a sympathetic family member quietly moved her body, buried her somewhere else, somewhere private, somewhere away from the tower, away from the shame, away from the spectacle? Bodies get misplaced, records get confused. It happened in Tudor England more often than you'd think. Someone dies, someone buries them, but the paperwork doesn't match the reality. The official records say one thing. The actual burial is somewhere else. And if Catherine was buried secretly, in an unmarked grave, in some London churchyard or private chapel or Howard family property, then she might still be there, undiscovered, intact, complete, just somewhere else. It's unlikely. It requires believing that tower records are wrong, that witness accounts are incomplete, that someone committed what would have been a serious crime, moving a traitor's body without permission, and kept it secret for 500 years. But it's possible, just barely possible, and that possibility, that slim chance that Catherine Howard is still out there somewhere, in a grave we haven't found, under a building or road or park in London, that keeps historians wondering. Or maybe she's exactly where the records say, in the chapel, but so completely destroyed by quicklime that the Victorian excavators simply couldn't detect her. Modern forensic techniques might do better. Chemical analysis of the soil, testing for calcium phosphate signatures, bone residue that wouldn't have been detectable in 1876 but might be now. But that would require digging up the chapel floor again, disturbing those burials, potentially destroying the memorials, disrupting the sacred space. For what? To maybe find chemical traces of a queen who died 5 centuries ago? To confirm what we already suspect? That quicklime dissolved her? Is that worth it? Most people say no. Let her rest. Let the mystery remain. Let Catherine Howard be gone. So what really happened to Catherine Howard's head? To her body? To her bones? We don't know. We can't know. The evidence is gone. Dissolved, missing, lost to time and chemicals and London clay. Maybe the quicklime theory is right. Maybe she was so young that her bones couldn't resist. Maybe 3 centuries was enough time for her to be completely destroyed. Maybe she's buried somewhere else. Maybe someone moved her, hid her, gave her a secret grave we'll never find. Maybe she's still there in the chapel, but so destroyed that Victorian excavators walked right past her, mixed with other bones. Impossible to identify, lost in the chaos. We'll never know, not unless someone invents time travel. Not unless new technology lets us test soil for bone residue centuries after quicklime dissolved it. Not unless we dig up the entire chapel again and commit to a forensic investigation that would take years and cost fortunes and potentially tell us nothing. It's not happening. Catherine Howard is gone. Truly. Completely. Permanently. The only thing left is her story. And even that's disputed, filtered through propaganda and romance and centuries of retellings. Was she guilty? Did she really have an affair with Thomas Culpeper? Or was she just a teenager who got caught up in political games she didn't understand? Who confessed under pressure? Who said what she was supposed to say because the alternative was worse? We don't know that either. The confessions exist, but confessions extracted under threat of torture aren't reliable. People confess to things they didn't do, especially when they're 17 and terrified and surrounded by men who want specific answers. Did she love Culpeper, or was he just another man using her? Another person who saw opportunity in a naive girl with access to the king? Did she practice with the block because she wanted to die well, or because she was so terrified that the only way to cope was through repetition, through making it mechanical? Through training her body to go through the motions so her mind wouldn't have to be fully present? We can only guess, can only piece together fragments of eyewitness accounts and court documents and histories written by people who had agendas. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the quicklime, or whatever disappeared her, did exactly what it was supposed to do. Made Catherine Howard into a story instead of a person. A legend instead of remains. A ghost instead of a grave. Made her unknowable, unreachable, gone. And now, 500 years later, all we can do is stand in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula and look at her memorial. Beautiful marble. Her name, her arms, her dates, and know, absolutely know, that there's nothing underneath. No bones, no coffin, no body. Just absence. Just the idea of Catherine Howard. Just the memory of a girl who was queen for 18 months and then vanished so thoroughly that even the earth forgot her. Tonight, when you think about Catherine Howard, don't think about the romantic legend. The young queen who died for love. The ghost screaming in Hampton Court. Don't think about the memorial tile in the chapel floor. Think about a 17-year-old girl kneeling in a prison cell at midnight, practicing how to lay her head on an executioner's block, over and over, getting the position right, making sure her hair wouldn't be in the way, making sure she'd die well, because that was the only thing she could control, the only victory left. Think about her walking to the scaffold at dawn, pale, shaking, needing help to stand, but walking, not running, not screaming, doing what she'd practiced, getting it right. Think about her kneeling, placing her neck on that block, exactly as she'd rehearsed, perfectly positioned, ready. Think about the blade falling, one blow, clean, the death she'd prepared for, the good death she'd earned through hours of terrible practice, and then think about her body being carried to the chapel, buried without ceremony, without a coffin, without a marker, covered with quicklime, left to dissolve over centuries, until there was nothing, until even the bones were gone, until the only evidence she'd ever existed was a name in history books and a tile in a chapel floor marking an empty grave. That's the real story of Catherine Howard. Not romance, not tragedy, not even execution, erasure. And 500 years later, we're still trying to find her. Still searching for bones that aren't there. Still looking for proof that she existed beyond the story, beyond the legend, beyond the empty space where her body should be. But she's gone. And the only thing we can do now is remember that she was here once, that she lived, that she died badly, that she was erased so thoroughly that even the earth can't remember her. Thanks for staying with me tonight. If you made it this far, drop a comment and let me know what you think. Had you heard about Catherine Howard before? Did you know her body was missing? Let's talk about it. And if you want more stories like this, stories about women who were erased from history but deserve to be remembered, subscribe. Because we're just getting started. Sleep well or don't. Sometimes the truth is too dark to sleep through. Sometimes the scariest stories aren't about ghosts. They're about the people who disappeared so completely that even the earth forgot them. Good night, sweet dreams. And remember, sometimes history's greatest horrors aren't what happened, they're what vanished.